With her wide, luminous eyes and irresistible charm, Brittany Murphy rose from teen star to Hollywood's most promising ingenue. From Clueless to 8 Mile, her talent lit up the screen with the warmth of someone destined for greatness. But behind that radiant smile was a storm no one could see. A silent struggle with exhaustion, control, and a cocktail of prescription pills that would one day steal her breath away. How did a woman adored by millions end up fighting for her life inside her own home? What really happened in those final days when the world thought she was finally at peace? This is the untold story of Brittany Murphy. Her rise, her secrets, and the tragic truth that Hollywood tried to bury. In the next few minutes, we'll uncover the full, never-before-told truth behind her mysterious downfall. Long before Hollywood's bright lights reflected in her eyes, Brittany Murphy lived in the shadow of survival. Born in Atlanta in 1977, she was raised primarily by her mother, Sharon, after her father, Angelo Bertolotti, left when she was just 2 years old. Sharon became her entire world. Mentor, protector, and the first person to tell her that she was destined to be a star. But love that intense can also become a cage. Their bond was so close that Brittany once said they shared the same heartbeat, yet beneath that devotion was the quiet pressure of a daughter carrying her mother's dreams as her own. As a teenager, Brittany found herself juggling schoolwork by day and auditions by night. She faced an industry obsessed with image. And for a young girl desperate for acceptance, those comments cut deep. Casting directors told her she was too short, too round-faced, too sweet to be the next Hollywood beauty. One infamous remark, "Huggable, but not fickable, asterisk," would echo in her mind for years, distorting her reflection every time she looked in the mirror. She began to change herself, physically and emotionally, trying to fit an image that wasn't hers. Weight melted away under diets whispered about on set. Rumors say she stopped eating during stressful shoots, masking fatigue with caffeine and over-the-counter pills. Sharon watched with pride and fear. The same industry that promised their future was quietly consuming her daughter's innocence. Behind closed doors, Brittany's insecurities grew into quiet rituals. Measuring meals, checking her reflection before every scene, counting calories as if each one could determine her worth. To the outside world, she was cheerful, humble, endlessly grateful. But in private, she kept notebooks filled with self-critiques. Tiny scribbles like, "Too tired, not enough, fix your smile." Every one maybe. The Regis, her childhood dream had come true, but it came wrapped in loneliness. She had learned early that love and approval were conditional. That in Hollywood, every compliment could vanish as quickly as the next role. And that early wound, the hunger to be enough, would become the quiet engine driving every choice, every sacrifice, and eventually, every heartbreak that followed. When Clueless hit theaters in 1995, Brittany Murphy wasn't just another side character. She was the film's beating heart. As Ty, the awkward, big-hearted newcomer, she radiated authenticity in a world obsessed with polish. Audiences adored her precisely because she wasn't perfect. Overnight, the girl who'd once been told she wasn't beautiful enough became Hollywood's symbol of vulnerability and warmth. But success, for Brittany, was never a finish line. It was a test. She moved from one transformative role to another. Girl, interrupted, 8 Mile, Don't Say a Word. Each one more emotionally raw than the last. Working beside stars like Eminem and Angelina Jolie, she learned to bury her own anxieties beneath performance. On screen, she was electric. Off screen, she was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and an ever-tightening sense of obligation. Friends would later recall how she worked, as if the world might forget her if she ever slowed down. Everyone maybe. This, Hollywood wanted her, but only a certain version of her. Executives urged her to lose more weight, to soften her voice, to polish her edge. Studio heads wanted glamour. She offered soul. Every red carpet appearance became another rehearsal for survival. Tabloids began to fixate on her shrinking frame and trembling hands, spinning headlines about her dramatic transformation. For Brittany, it wasn't transformation. It was erosion. Each demand shaved away another layer of the girl who once laughed too loudly and dreamed too freely. Still, she gave everything. When the offers began to slow in the mid-2000s, she reinvented herself once more, this time as a singer. Her voice, smoky and aching, carried through tracks like Faster Kill Pussycat, proving she was more than a Hollywood archetype. Yet even music came with its own price. Endless studio nights, energy pills, and pressure to perform left her exhausted. The physical toll was visible. Her 5'3" frame hovered near 95 pounds, and exhaustion was masked behind heavy makeup and bright smiles. In interviews, she spoke softly, deflecting questions about her health with the kind of practiced grace only a wounded person can master. "I'm just tired," she'd say, eyes darting to her publicist. "I've been working too hard." Behind those gentle excuses was a woman terrified that stepping back meant disappearing. The spotlight that had once felt like validation now burned like interrogation. Her phone rang less. Her agents grew distant. She had learned that in Hollywood, fame was conditional love, and its withdrawal felt like abandonment. In response, Brittany clung tighter to control over her schedule, her diet, her emotions, and later, her relationships. That's when Simon Monjack appeared. The mysterious British screenwriter who promised protection, devotion, and stability. To Brittany, he seemed like a refuge from an industry that had taken everything. To the world, he seemed like a shadow forming around her. But for a fleeting moment, she believed in love's sanctuary. She believed she could rest. As the curtain of her career shimmered in the background, Brittany stood at the crossroads of dream and delusion. A woman adored for her light, but quietly fading under its heat. Her rise had not been a straight climb, it was a trade. Brilliance exchanged for exhaustion, applause for identity. And even as cameras flashed and crowds cheered, she was already paying the invisible price, the one every star learns too late, when the dream stops being yours and starts being theirs. When Brittany met Simon Monjack in 2006, it felt like fate disguised as comfort. He was older, British, articulate, an aspiring screenwriter who promised to shield her from a world that had used her and cast her aside. To a woman whose worth had been measured by approval, Simon's worship felt intoxicating. He called her my angel, my muse, the only real one. In him, Brittany saw a home she never had. In her, Simon saw both a savior and an opportunity. Within months, they were inseparable. He answered her phone, managed her emails, and slowly blurred the lines between husband, manager, and gatekeeper. Former colleagues noticed the shift. Brittany stopped showing up for meetings. Her mother spoke less, and her once bubbly energy turned cautious, almost rehearsed. On red carpets, Simon hovered inches behind her, whispering advice or perhaps instruction. Insiders whispered that he dismissed her team, controlled her medication, even monitored her conversations. What began as devotion was turning into quiet isolation. Money became another symptom of their downfall. Reports later revealed that Simon's past was tangled with lawsuits, unpaid debts, and failed schemes. He allegedly spent millions of Brittany's earnings on luxury items, travel, and extravagant promises of new film projects that never materialized. Friends tried to intervene, but calls went unanswered. Brittany defended him fiercely, insisting he's misunderstood. In truth, she was clinging to the illusion that love could heal what fame had broken. Their home in Hollywood Hills, once meant to be a sanctuary, became a fortress. Curtains stayed drawn, visitors were rare, and the once bustling energy of Brittany's career faded into silence. Those who caught glimpses described her as fragile, her voice softer, her movements slower. She would apologize for looking tired, smile through exhaustion, and glance toward Simon for approval before answering questions. The industry began to distance itself. Directors labeled her unreliable. Tabloids branded her difficult. In reality, she was collapsing under the weight of misplaced loyalty. Her last film, Something Wicked, became a haunting mirror of her own life, a story of love, control, and tragedy. Crew members recalled Simon interfering with production, offering unsolicited directions, insisting on being on set, even forbidding Brittany from performing certain scenes. It wasn't love anymore. It was captivity wearing affection's mask. One night, a close friend called and described her voice as trembling. She confessed she was exhausted and afraid, but then quickly corrected herself. No, I'm fine. Simon takes good care of me." It was the kind of sentence that hides more truth than it reveals. By late 2009, the couple's isolation was complete. The house was filled with prescription bottles labeled under 3 different names: hers, his, and her mother's. Brittany had grown pale, coughing persistently, losing weight by the week. Yet she refused medical help, afraid it would trigger gossip about drugs or relapse. She was, in Simon's words, resting at home. But the home had become a mausoleum of whispers, medicine, and fear. When she walked down the staircase of that house for the last time, barefoot and dizzy, her body was already signaling collapse. Hollywood's darling, who once glowed on screen beside giants, was now invisible, trapped in a love story that had devoured her. The tragedy of Brittany Murphy was not that she loved too little, but that she loved too blindly. In the end, the man she thought would protect her from the cruelty of Hollywood became its echo. Another force demanding control, another voice defining her worth. And as the world looked away, believing she had simply faded, Brittany Murphy was silently fighting for air inside a dream that had turned into her prison. The final weeks of Brittany Murphy's life unfolded like the last act of a slow-burning tragedy. Unnoticed, unstoppable, and unbearably quiet. By December 2009, her body was failing. She had lost alarming weight. Her complexion had turned ghostly pale. Friends said she coughed constantly and could barely climb the stairs of her Hollywood Hills home. The woman once known for her vitality now looked like a shadow drifting through her own house. On the morning of the 20th of December 2009, she collapsed in the bathroom. Her mother, Sharon, called 911. The paramedics who arrived found her barely breathing, surrounded by prescription bottles. Some in her name, others in her husband's, and several labeled under her mother's. At 10:04 a.m., Brittany Murphy was pronounced dead at just 32 years old. The official cause: pneumonia, severe anemia, and intoxication from multiple prescription medications. A cocktail that, according to the coroner, weakened her system until she could no longer fight the infection. If you wanted to ferret it, the world gasped. How could someone so young, so seemingly harmless, vanish overnight? Within hours, tabloid headlines screamed, "Hollywood poison. Was she killed?" and toxic love story ends in death. Conspiracy theories multiplied faster than condolences. Her father, Angelo Bertolotti, publicly claimed she had been poisoned, suggesting traces of heavy metals were found in hair samples. Others pointed fingers at Simon Monjack, who refused an autopsy for himself when he later died, just 5 months after Brittany, from the same combination, pneumonia and anemia. But beneath the noise, the truth was far more tragic and far less cinematic. The coroner's full report painted a story of exhaustion, neglect, and misguided treatment. Brittany had been sick for days. High fever, shortness of breath, dizziness. Yet, instead of seeing a doctor, she self-medicated with a cocktail of antibiotics, painkillers, cough suppressants, and over-the-counter remedies. The autopsy listed acetaminophen, hydrocodone, chlorpheniramine, and L-methamphetamine. None illegal, but together lethal when combined with weakness and dehydration. Her condition: severe iron deficiency anemia, meant her body's oxygen levels were already dangerously low. With her immune system failing, even a common respiratory infection became fatal. A pathologist later noted that a single transfusion or hospitalization could likely have saved her life. But she never sought it. Fear of scandal, fear of cameras, fear of being branded unstable. Those fears killed her as much as any chemical did. Inside that house, love had turned into silence. Reports suggested Brittany was terrified of hospitals. Simon convinced her that doctors would leak information to the press. Instead, he stocked the house with medicine. Their home became a fragile pharmacy. Pills replacing care, secrecy replacing help. After her death, investigators described the scene as haunting. Makeup scattered across countertops, dozens of prescription bottles, some opened, some half-used, and a room that smelled faintly of mold and sickness. There were no signs of violence, only the stillness of someone who had tried to hold herself together until the very end. Then came Simon's death. 5 months later, in the same house, under eerily identical circumstances. Pneumonia, anemia, weak heart, empty medicine bottles. The case reignited public obsession. Theories ranged from toxic mold in the home to murder for hire schemes. But after months of testing, toxicologists confirmed no poison, no conspiracy. Just 2 broken bodies living inside the same crumbling illusion. Brittany's posthumous image became a battlefield between love, guilt, and reputation. Her mother, Sharon, denied every theory of foul play, but found herself accused by tabloids of complicity. Angelo continued to claim, "There's something they're hiding." Hollywood predictably moved on, until documentaries years later tried to piece together the fragments of her story. Yet the real story wasn't in the mystery of how she died, but in why she never reached for help. Her life was a mirror held up to the dark side of fame. The pressure to appear perfect, the paranoia of betrayal, the industry that punishes imperfection but profits from its aftermath. She had learned to hide her pain behind charm, to disguise sickness as shyness, and to smile through exhaustion because the camera never forgave fatigue. Every tragedy leaves behind an uncomfortable truth. For Brittany Murphy, it was this: fame teaches you how to perform even while dying. When her body begged for rest, she kept working. When her voice faltered, she whispered lines. When her reflection thinned into fragility, she convinced herself that thinness meant success. The official files closed quietly. "Accidental death," they wrote. But those words couldn't capture the years of slow erosion, of a woman who gave too much, loved too fiercely, and trusted the wrong kind of care. Brittany didn't die from one decision. She died from 1,000 small surrenders. Today, her story stands as both warning and requiem, a reminder that in Hollywood, some lights don't fade. They burn out. And behind every glossy headline about beauty, fame, or scandal, there's often a girl still waiting for someone to tell her, "You can stop now. You're enough." Would have won it any day.